Hello and welcome to a journey into one of the most profound emotional landscapes in the animal kingdom. Tonight, we're going to explore something that millions of dog owners wonder about every single day, something that tugs at our hearts every time we reach for our keys, every time we close that front door behind us. What does your dog actually feel when you leave? It's a question that seems simple on the surface, but as we'll discover together, the answer reveals a world of emotional complexity that science is only now beginning to fully understand. This isn't just about whether your dog misses you, though they almost certainly do. It's about the intricate dance of neurochemicals, ancient evolutionary bonds, and profound emotional experiences that unfold in your absence. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin to understand the hidden emotional world of our canine companions, the nature of the bond. To understand what a dog feels when you leave, we first need to appreciate the extraordinary nature of the relationship between humans and dogs. This isn't like any other interspecies relationship on Earth. Over the course of perhaps 30,000 years, dogs have evolved alongside us in ways that go far beyond simple domestication. They haven't just learned to tolerate us or even to rely on us for food and shelter. They've developed the capacity to form genuine emotional attachments that mirror the bonds we form with other humans. Think about that for a moment. When you look into your dog's eyes, something remarkable happens. Something that doesn't occur with any other animal, not even with our closest primate relatives. Research has shown that when a dog and their human gaze at each other, both experience a surge in oxytocin, the same hormone that floods a mother's brain when she looks at her infant child. This isn't metaphor or anthropomorphism, it's measurable, quantifiable biology. In studies conducted at Azabu University in Japan, researcher Miho Nagasawa and her colleagues discovered something extraordinary. When dogs and their owners engaged in mutual gazing for just 30 minutes, oxytocin levels increased significantly in both species. In some dogs, the increase was around 150%. In their human companions, it could reach 300% or more. This creates what scientists call a positive feedback loop. The dog gazes at the human. Oxytocin rises in both. The human responds with more attention and affection, which causes the dog to gaze longer, which increases oxytocin further, and on and on. This is the same neurochemical mechanism that binds mothers to infants across all mammalian species. Dogs, uniquely among animals, have somehow co-opted this ancient bonding system and applied it to their relationship with us. Wolves, even when raised by humans from puppyhood, don't show this same response. There's something about dogs specifically, something that evolved during their long journey alongside humanity that allows them to tap into our deepest emotional circuitry. But this profound connection comes with a cost. The stronger the bond, the more significant the rupture when that bond is temporarily broken. When you leave your dog alone, you're not just removing yourself from their physical environment. You're disrupting a relationship that operates at the most fundamental biological level. Your dog's brain, wired over thousands of generations to seek proximity to you, suddenly finds itself in a state of absence, and that absence triggers a cascade of responses. The intensity of this response varies enormously from dog to dog. Some dogs seem remarkably self-sufficient, content to sleep away the hours until their human returns. Others experience profound distress, their entire system thrown into a state of alarm. Understanding this variation, understanding what creates resilience in some dogs and vulnerability in others. This is one of the great challenges of canine behavioral science. What we're learning is that the bond between human and dog is not uniform. It's shaped by early experiences, by genetics, by the quality of daily interactions, by a dog's individual temperament. Some dogs form what researchers call secure attachments. They're confident in their human's eventual return, able to self-soothe in the meantime. Others form anxious attachments. They're never quite certain that their human will come back, and this uncertainty keeps them in a state of vigilance and stress. The research into attachment styles in dogs mirrors very closely the attachment research done with human children. In the 1960s, developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth developed something called the strange situation test to assess attachment in human infants. The basic premise was simple. Observe how an infant responds when their mother leaves the room, what they do during the separation, and how they react when the mother returns. Based on these observations, Ainsworth identified distinct attachment styles: secure, anxious avoidant, anxious resistant, and disorganized. In 1998, researchers Josef Topal, Adam Miklosi, and Vilmos Chanyi adapted this test for dogs. They found remarkably similar patterns. When a dog's owner left them alone in an unfamiliar room, dogs showed individual differences in how they coped. Some explored the room confidently, occasionally checking the door, but generally managing well. Others became highly distressed, pacing, whining, scratching at the door. And when the owners returned, the dogs showed different reunion behaviors, some greeting enthusiastically but calmly, others showing a mix of excitement and something that looked like reproach, and still others seeming almost conflicted about the return. These patterns weren't random. They correlated with the dog's history, their early socialization experiences, and importantly, the consistency and quality of their relationship with their owner. Dogs whose owners were inconsistent, sometimes warm and attentive, sometimes distant or punishing, tended to show more anxious attachment patterns. Dogs whose owners were reliably responsive and supportive showed more secure attachments. This matters enormously when we think about what a dog experiences in your absence. A securely attached dog might miss you, might look forward to your return, but isn't consumed by anxiety about whether you'll come back. An anxiously attached dog, on the other hand, may spend your entire absence in a state of stress, their nervous system unable to settle because their past experience hasn't taught them that separations are temporary and predictable. The chemistry of connection. Let's delve deeper into the biological mechanisms that underpin this bond, because understanding the chemistry helps us understand the emotional experience. Oxytocin isn't called the bonding hormone for nothing. In mammals, it serves multiple functions, but one of its primary roles is facilitating social connection and reducing stress in social contexts. When oxytocin levels rise, we feel calmer in the presence of those we're bonded with. We trust more. We're more attuned to social cues. We feel connected. In dogs, oxytocin operates in much the same way. Research has shown that when dogs interact with their owners, through petting, through play, through simple proximity, their oxytocin levels rise, and this correlates with behaviors that suggest contentment and happiness. Their cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, often decrease during these interactions. The dog's physiology literally shifts into a calmer, more positive state when in the presence of their bonded human. But here's what makes this particularly poignant when we think about separation. Oxytocin doesn't just make positive interactions feel good, it also intensifies the negative feelings associated with separation from a bonded partner. In human studies, people with higher oxytocin reactivity, those whose oxytocin surges highest during positive social interactions, also tend to experience stronger separation distress. The hormone that binds us to others also makes us miss them more acutely when they're gone. There's another hormone we need to talk about: cortisol. Often called the stress hormone, cortisol is part of the body's response to challenge or threat. When a dog perceives something stressful, a loud noise, an unfamiliar situation, the departure of their owner, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activates, triggering the release of cortisol. This is part of the normal stress response, and in the short term, it's adaptive. It mobilizes energy, sharpens focus, prepares the body to respond to whatever challenge has emerged. But chronic elevation of cortisol, the kind that happens when a dog is repeatedly or continuously stressed, has negative effects. It suppresses immune function. It can interfere with learning and memory. It contributes to a state of anxiety that becomes self-perpetuating. And importantly for our discussion, studies have shown that some dogs left alone show sustained elevation in cortisol levels throughout the separation period. Interestingly, not all dogs show this cortisol increase. In a study published in Applied Animal Behavior Science, researchers measured cortisol levels in dogs before, during, and after being left alone for periods ranging from 30 minutes to 4 hours. They found significant individual variation. Some dogs showed little change in cortisol during separations. Others showed marked increases that persisted throughout the time alone. These differences weren't random. They correlated with the dog's behavioral responses. Dogs who appeared more distressed behaviorally, pacing, whining, destruction, were more likely to show elevated cortisol. What's particularly interesting is what happened after 2 hours of separation. The researchers found that dogs left alone for 2 hours showed significantly more excitement and greeting behavior when their owners returned compared to dogs left alone for just 30 minutes. But there was little additional increase in greeting intensity when comparing 2 hours to 4 hours. This suggests that dogs do have some capacity to track the duration of absences, at least roughly, but perhaps that capacity has limits. Or perhaps, beyond a certain threshold, the emotional response reaches a ceiling. The study of stress responses in separated dogs has revealed something else important: the distinction between acute and chronic stress. Acute stress, the kind triggered by a single time-limited event, is normal and manageable. The cortisol rises, the dog copes with the stressor, the cortisol falls again. But chronic stress, the kind that comes from repeated, unpredictable, or prolonged stressors, is different. It can lead to lasting changes in the dog's stress response system, making them more reactive, more easily stressed, less able to regulate their emotions. Dogs who experience severe separation anxiety aren't just stressed in the moment of separation. They may be in a state of chronic stress that persists even when their owner is present. Their baseline cortisol levels may be elevated. Their threshold for stress may be lowered. They're living in a state of hypervigilance, always on edge, always anticipating the next separation. This isn't just an emotional state, it's a physiological one with real impacts on health and well-being. Time as a dog knows it. One of the most fascinating questions in canine cognition is how dogs experience time. Do they understand that you've been gone for 5 minutes versus 5 hours? Do they have a concept of tomorrow when you promise you'll be back soon? The answer is both yes and no, and understanding this helps us appreciate what separation feels like from a dog's perspective. Dogs don't experience time the way humans do. We live in a world of clocks and calendars, of schedules and deadlines. We can think about the past. Remember what happened last week, last year, decades ago. We can imagine the future, make plans for tomorrow, next month, our retirement. We have what's called episodic memory, the ability to mentally travel through time, to re-experience past events, and to project ourselves into future scenarios. Dogs almost certainly don't have this capacity, at least not in the same way. While there's ongoing debate among researchers about whether dogs have episodic memory, some recent studies suggest they might have a rudimentary form of it. Their experience of time is fundamentally different from ours. They live much more in the present moment, responsive to what's happening now, rather than ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. But this doesn't mean dogs have no sense of time at all. Far from it. Dogs have what's called a circadian rhythm, an internal biological clock that operates on roughly a 24-hour cycle. This rhythm regulates sleep and wakefulness, appetite, body temperature, hormone secretion, and many other physiological processes. It's driven by a cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which responds to light and darkness to keep the body's processes synchronized with the day-night cycle. This circadian rhythm gives dogs a rough sense of daily time. They know when it's time to eat, time for a walk, time for sleep. If you feed your dog at 6 o'clock every evening, they'll start anticipating that meal well before the appointed hour. Their digestive system begins preparing. They become more alert, more active. This isn't because they're reading the clock on the wall, it's because their internal clock, calibrated through repeated experience, tells them that this particular time of day is associated with food. But dogs have another, even more fascinating way of tracking time, through scent. A dog's sense of smell is roughly 40 times more acute than a human's. They have around 300 million olfactory receptors in their noses compared to our 6 million. And importantly for our purposes, dogs can detect the gradual fading of scents over time. When you leave your house in the morning, you leave behind a scent signature. Your smell is strongest immediately after you've left, saturating the spaces where you've been. But as the hours pass, that scent gradually fades. For a dog with their extraordinarily sensitive nose, this fading scent provides information about how long you've been gone. Fresh scent means recent departure. Faint scent means longer absence. This is what some researchers call the scent clock. This was first seriously proposed by Alexandra Horowitz, a dog cognition researcher at Barnard College who has spent years studying how dogs perceive their world. In her work, She's observed that dogs seem to respond differently to scents of varying strengths and ages. A dog can distinguish between a scent trail that's 5 minutes old versus one that's 5 hours old. And in the context of waiting for an owner to return, this ability might allow dogs to have a sense of how long, even without the ability to count hours. There's another aspect of canine time perception that's worth considering. Research suggests that dogs may experience time as passing more slowly than humans do. This is based on studies across various species showing that metabolic rate and lifespan correlate with subjective time perception. Animals with faster metabolisms, smaller hearts, quicker breathing rates, tend to perceive time as passing more slowly. A fly, for instance, perceives events happening much faster than we do, which is why they're so hard to swat. Dogs have higher metabolic rates than humans. Their hearts beat faster, typically 60 to 140 beats per minute compared to our 60 to 100. Their respiratory rate is higher. They age faster. And this metabolic difference might mean that their subjective experience of time is stretched. What feels like 15 minutes to you might feel longer to your dog. An hour might feel like 90 minutes. A full workday, 8 hours, might feel interminable. This is speculation, of course. We can't know what time feels like to a dog. But if it's true, it adds another dimension to understanding separation distress. Your dog isn't just waiting for an objectively long period. From their subjective perspective, that period might feel even longer. Those 8 hours you're at work could feel like 12 hours to your dog, each minute dragging by more slowly than it does for you. What we can say with more certainty is that dogs do seem to distinguish between different durations of absence. The study I mentioned earlier, where dogs were left alone for varying periods, found that reunion behavior was more intense after 2 hours than after 30 minutes. Dogs greeted their owners more enthusiastically, engaged in more physical contact, showed more excitement. This suggests they perceive the difference. They know in some way that they've been alone longer. But there are limits to this perception. After 2 hours, the intensity of reunion didn't significantly increase with longer absences. Dogs left for 4 hours didn't greet their owners more enthusiastically than those left for 2 hours. This could mean several things. Perhaps beyond a certain threshold, the emotional response maxes out. Perhaps the dog's ability to track time duration becomes less precise, or perhaps other factors. The dog's need to eliminate, their hunger, their boredom, start to overshadow the simple passage of time as determinants of their emotional state. Memory plays a crucial role in how dogs experience your absences. Dogs have excellent associative memory. They learn to connect specific cues with outcomes. The sound of your car means you're home. The jingle of keys means you're leaving. The putting on of certain shoes or grabbing of certain bags means a trip without them. Over time, dogs build up a library of these associations, and they use them to predict what's about to happen. This associative memory means that for many dogs, the stress of separation doesn't start when you actually leave. It starts during the departure routine. As soon as they see you pick up your work bag, their cortisol might start rising. As soon as they hear your keys, they might begin feeling anxious. They've learned the sequence that leads to your departure, and anticipatory stress kicks in. But memory also provides comfort. A dog who has repeatedly experienced your departures, followed by your returns, has learned that separations are temporary. The neural pathway connecting owner leaves with owner returns has been strengthened through repetition. This is why gradually building up tolerance to separations, starting with very short absences and slowly increasing duration, can help dogs develop confidence that returns always follow departures. The moment of departure. Let's slow down and really examine what happens in those crucial moments when you prepare to leave. You're getting ready for work, gathering your things, perhaps saying goodbye to your dog. From your perspective, this is routine. You do this every weekday. Your dog should be used to it by now. But let's look at it from your dog's perspective, considering everything we've learned about their neurobiology, their attachment, their perception of time. Your dog watches as you move through your departure routine. If they're attuned to these patterns, and most dogs are, they know what's coming. Their brain begins preparing for the separation even before you've reached the door. This preparation isn't conscious decision making, it's automatic, physiological. The anticipation of separation triggers the release of stress hormones. The dog's sympathetic nervous system begins to activate. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallower, muscles tense. For some dogs, this is a minor, manageable uptick in arousal. They might feel a little excited, a little disappointed that you're leaving, but nothing they can't handle. They'll watch you go, perhaps with some resignation, then settle down to wait. For other dogs, this anticipation triggers something more intense. Their stress response kicks into high gear. They might begin panting, pacing, following you frantically from room to room. Their pupils might dilate. They might whine or bark. This is the sympathetic nervous system in overdrive, fight or flight activation, preparing the body for a threat. When you finally leave, closing the door behind you, your dog is left in a fundamentally altered state. Your presence, which has been a source of safety, comfort, and oxytocin-mediated calm, is suddenly absent. The dog's social universe has contracted. They're alone. And depending on their attachment, style, their past experiences, their individual temperament, this aloneness provokes different responses. Research by Daniel Mills at the University of Lincoln has identified 4 distinct forms of distress that dogs can experience during separations. First, there's distress focused on getting away from something in the house. This might be a dog who has a negative association with being indoors alone. Perhaps they've had frightening experiences during past separations, or they've become conditioned to fear certain sounds or stimuli that occur when the owner is away. These dogs might scratch at doors or windows, trying to escape. Second, there's distress focused on getting to something outside. This is the dog whose primary motivation is reunion with the owner. They're not trying to escape the house because they're afraid of it. They're trying to leave because they want to follow their owner. These dogs might focus their efforts on the door through which the owner left, or they might position themselves at windows where they can watch for the owner's return. Third, there's distress in response to external stimuli. Some dogs are fine with their owner's absence until something happens. A knock at the door, a loud noise, an unfamiliar person passing by the window. These external triggers cause a spike in arousal and distress that the dog, without their owner present to provide reassurance, has difficulty managing. This form of distress might look intermittent. The dog alternates between calm and highly stressed, depending on what's happening in their environment. Fourth, there's distress related to boredom and understimulation. This is perhaps the mildest form, but it's still a form of distress. Dogs are social animals who evolved to live in groups, engaging in various activities throughout the day. A dog left alone in a house with nothing to do, no social interaction, no cognitive stimulation, can become frustrated and restless. They might engage in destructive behaviors not out of anxiety, but out of sheer boredom and the need to do something with all their pent-up energy. These aren't mutually exclusive categories. Many dogs experience a combination of these forms of distress, and importantly, they require different management approaches. A dog who's primarily frustrated and understimulated might do well with puzzle toys and enrichment activities. A dog who's terrified of being alone might need medication and systematic desensitization. Recognizing which emotional states are driving the behavior is crucial for helping the dog. What's happening physiologically during these various forms of distress? Let's focus on the classic separation anxiety scenario. The dog whose primary issue is the absence of their bonded human. As we've discussed, the anticipation of separation triggers cortisol release. When the owner actually leaves, this stress response continues and may intensify. The dog's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis remains activated. Cortisol stays elevated, heart rate remains high. The sympathetic nervous system stays engaged. In this state, the dog's cognitive function is impaired. High stress narrows attention and reduces flexibility in thinking. A highly anxious dog can't easily learn new coping strategies because their brain is in survival mode, not learning mode. They're driven by emotional impulses, the urge to find their owner, the need to reduce their distress, rather than by thoughtful problem solving. For some dogs, this distress state is time-limited. After an initial period of agitation, they settle. Their cortisol begins to decline. Their heart rate slows. They curl up and sleep, conserving energy until their owner returns. For other dogs, the distress is sustained throughout the separation. They remain in a state of high arousal, unable to self-soothe, their stress hormones elevated for hours. This is the difference between a dog with normal, manageable reactions to separation and a dog with true separation anxiety. The emotional palette of dogs. To truly understand what a dog feels in your absence, we need to understand which emotions dogs are capable of experiencing. This has been a contentious topic in science for a long time. For much of the 20th century, behaviorism dominated psychology and related fields. Behaviorists argued that we couldn't know what animals felt internally, so we should focus only on observable behavior. Speculation about animal emotions was considered unscientific anthropomorphism. But science has moved beyond this narrow view. We now recognize that emotions serve important functions across species. They're not unique to humans. They're ancient systems that evolved to help organisms respond adaptively to challenges and opportunities in their environment. Fear motivates escape from danger. Anger motivates defense of resources. Joy reinforces behaviors that promote survival and reproduction. These emotional systems exist in mammals broadly, not just in humans. In dogs specifically, Neuroscientist Gregory Burns at Emory University has conducted pioneering research using functional MRI to study canine brain activity. In one notable study, he trained dogs to lie completely still in an fMRI scanner, no small feat, and then exposed them to various stimuli while imaging their brains. When the dogs saw hand signals from their owner indicating they were about to receive a treat, a specific region of the brain called the caudate nucleus showed increased activity. This same region activates in human brains during positive emotional states, particularly in association with anticipated rewards. What's even more interesting is that when the dogs saw hand signals from their owner, as opposed to hand signals from an unfamiliar person, there was increased activity in areas of the brain associated with emotional processing and social cognition. The dogs weren't just responding to the prospect of food, they were responding specifically to the social interaction with their bonded human. So, which emotions can dogs feel? Based on neurological research, behavioral observations, and comparative studies across species, scientists generally agree that dogs experience what we might call basic emotions. These include joy, fear, anger, disgust, surprise, and perhaps sadness, though sadness is debated. These are emotions that emerge early in mammalian development and that don't require complex cognitive processing. What dogs probably don't experience are what are called complex or social emotions that require sophisticated self-awareness and understanding of social hierarchies. Things like pride, shame, and guilt. These require an individual to evaluate themselves from others' perspectives, to have a theory of mind that allows them to imagine what others think about them. While dogs are remarkably good at reading human emotional states, there's no strong evidence they can engage in this kind of meta-representation. When we talk about what a dog feels when you leave, then we're probably talking about basic emotions: fear, the perception of threat or danger; anxiety, a state of apprehension about anticipated threat; frustration, the blocking of a desired goal; distress, a general state of discomfort or suffering; perhaps sadness, a low energy state in response to loss, though whether dogs experience sadness as distinct from distress is unclear. The intensity and valence, positive or negative, of these emotions depends on many factors. A securely attached, well-adjusted dog might feel mild disappointment when you leave, mixed perhaps with anticipation of your return. An anxiously attached dog with a history of abandonment might feel intense fear and panic. A frustrated, understimulated dog might feel irritation and restlessness. The emotional experience varies enormously. One emotion worth focusing on is what we might call loneliness. Do dogs feel lonely when left alone? Loneliness in humans is the distressing feeling of being alone or separated from others, of lacking social connection. It's distinct from simply being physically alone. You can be lonely in a crowded room or content when physically isolated. Loneliness is about the mismatch between desired and actual social connection. Dogs, as highly social animals, seem to experience something like loneliness. When left alone, particularly for extended periods, many dogs show behaviors consistent with a motivation to seek social contact. They position themselves at doors or windows. They become intensely excited at any sign of their owner's return. They may engage in attention-seeking behaviors with any person who enters their environment, even strangers. This suggests they're not just missing their specific owner, though they certainly are. They're also missing social interaction more generally. Studies of dogs in shelters provide insight into this. Shelter dogs, who are often housed individually with limited human interaction, show higher levels of stress hormones, more behavioral problems, and more difficulty adjusting even after adoption, compared to dogs who've always lived in homes with consistent human companionship. The lack of social contact, the loneliness, has measurable negative effects. But loneliness in dogs isn't just about missing any social contact. It's specifically about missing their bonded humans. A dog left alone for 8 hours might be distressed. That same dog, left with another dog they're bonded to, might be fine. Or conversely, some dogs seem to care only about their primary human and show little interest in interactions with other dogs or people. The specific social preferences matter. There's also an important distinction to make between loneliness and boredom. A dog might be perfectly content socially, but still frustrated by lack of stimulation. They need cognitive engagement, physical activity, exploration. A dog who gets plenty of human interaction but is otherwise understimulated can develop behavior problems, chewing, digging, excessive barking, not from separation distress, but from frustration and excess energy. The emotional experiences are different, even if some of the behavioral outcomes look similar. Separation anxiety as a syndrome. We've been using the term separation anxiety throughout this discussion, but it's worth taking a closer look at what this actually means as a clinical condition. Separation anxiety in dogs isn't just missing their owner. It's a specific disorder characterized by extreme distress and panic when separated from bonded humans. It's one of the most common behavioral problems in dogs, affecting somewhere between 20 and 40% of dogs referred to behavioral specialists. Dogs with true separation anxiety show a constellation of symptoms. These typically include excessive vocalization, barking, howling, whining, that begins soon after the owner leaves and continues persistently. Destructive behavior, often focused on exit points like doors and windows, or on the owner's possessions which carry their scent. Inappropriate elimination, urinating or defecating indoors despite being house-trained. Escape attempts, which can result in self-injury. And when the owner returns, these dogs show intense, prolonged greeting behaviors. They're not just happy to see their owner, they're frantic, almost desperate. The key feature that distinguishes separation anxiety from other behavior problems is the trigger. These behaviors occur specifically in response to separation from the bonded human. They don't happen when the owner is home. They don't happen when the dog is simply confined to a room but can still see or hear the owner. They happen because the owner is absent, and they typically begin within minutes of the owner's departure. What causes separation anxiety? Research has identified several risk factors, though no single factor determines whether a dog will develop the condition. Dogs from shelters or rescue situations are at higher risk, particularly those who've experienced multiple rehomings or abandonment. Early separation from the litter, being taken from the mother before 7 or 8 weeks of age, increases risk. Male dogs are statistically more likely to develop separation anxiety than female dogs, though we don't fully understand why. Traumatic experiences during separations, like being caught in a storm or an accident in the house, can trigger or exacerbate anxiety. There's also growing evidence for a genetic component. Certain breeds appear more predisposed to anxiety disorders, including separation anxiety. Herding breeds, border collies, Australian shepherds, who were bred to work closely with humans and to be constantly attentive to their handler, seem to have higher rates. Brachycephalic breeds, those with flat faces like pugs and bulldogs, may have higher rates, possibly related to breathing difficulties that create chronic stress. Sporting breeds and working breeds, who were bred to operate collaboratively with humans, also show elevated rates. But breed is far from deterministic. Individual variation within breeds is enormous. A dog's early experiences, their socialization, the consistency and quality of their attachment relationships, these matter far more than breed in determining vulnerability to separation anxiety. A well-socialized, securely attached border collie is less likely to develop anxiety than a poorly socialized, anxiously attached Labrador, despite breed differences in baseline predisposition. The neurobiology of separation anxiety involves dysregulation of the stress response system. Dogs with separation anxiety often have abnormalities in their hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Their baseline cortisol levels may be elevated. Their cortisol response to stressors may be exaggerated or prolonged. They may have difficulty returning to baseline after a stressor ends. In other words, their stress response system is hyperactive and poorly regulated. There's also evidence of differences in neurotransmitter systems. Serotonin, a neurotransmitter involved in mood regulation, appears to function differently in anxious dogs. This is why selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs like fluoxetine, the same medications used to treat anxiety and depression in humans, are often prescribed for dogs with severe separation anxiety. These medications don't cure the condition, but they can reduce the intensity of the emotional response enough that behavioral interventions become possible. Treatment for separation anxiety is complex and typically involves multiple approaches. Behavior modification is essential. This usually means systematic desensitization, gradually increasing the duration of separations, starting with absences so brief they don't trigger anxiety, and very slowly building up tolerance. Counter-conditioning, creating positive associations with the owner's departure cues and with being alone. Environmental enrichment, providing puzzle toys, food dispensers, things that keep the dog mentally engaged. And critically, eliminating any punishment for anxiety-related behaviors, as punishment only increases stress and worsens the condition. For severe cases, medication may be necessary. The most commonly prescribed are SSRIs like fluoxetine or sertraline, or tricyclic antidepressants like clomipramine. These medications take several weeks to reach full effectiveness, but can significantly reduce anxiety levels. There are also faster-acting medications like alprazolam or trazodone that can be given before anticipated separations to reduce acute anxiety. But medication alone is rarely sufficient. The dog still needs to learn new coping strategies, to develop confidence in being alone, to modify the learned associations between separation and panic. This is where the behavior modification work is crucial, and it's hard work, requiring patience, consistency, and often months of gradual progress. One of the challenges in treating separation anxiety is that it's often unintentionally reinforced. Owners naturally want to comfort their distressed dog. They might spend extra time with the dog, before leaving, providing lots of attention and affection, trying to make the dog feel better. But this can actually increase anxiety by making the contrast between owner present and owner absent even more stark. Or owners might return home and immediately rush to the dog, providing intense greeting and attention. This reinforces the dog's belief that the owner's return is the most important, most wonderful thing in the world, which increases the distress of separation. Effective treatment often requires owners to modify their own behavior in ways that feel counterintuitive, keeping greetings calm and brief, making departures matter of fact rather than emotionally charged, practicing departures randomly throughout the day, sometimes leaving for seconds, sometimes for minutes, so the dog can't predict duration, ensuring the dog gets plenty of exercise and mental stimulation, at times separate from departures and returns, so they're not dependent on the owner's presence for all their enrichment. It's also important to recognize that not all distress during owner absence is separation anxiety. As we discussed earlier, dogs can be distressed for other reasons: fear of environmental stimuli, frustration, boredom. The distinction matters because the treatment approaches differ. A dog who's primarily understimulated needs more exercise and enrichment, not anti-anxiety medication. A dog who's fearful of environmental stimuli needs desensitization to those specific triggers. Misdiagnosing the underlying cause can lead to ineffective treatment and prolonged suffering for the dog. The biology of the reunion. Now let's turn our attention to a moment of pure joy. The reunion. When you come home after being away, your dog's reaction can range from calm pleasure to absolute ecstatic celebration. They might wag their tail gently and nuzzle your hand, or they might leap and bark and spin in circles, unable to contain their excitement. What's happening in these moments? What drives the intensity of reunion behaviors? From a neurochemical perspective, reunions trigger a surge of positive emotions. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation, spikes when the owner appears. The dog's anticipation of positive interaction is fulfilled. Oxytocin levels rise as the dog reconnects with their bonded human. If the dog has been stressed during the separation, the owner's return provides relief, which is itself rewarding. The shift from a state of distress to a state of safety and comfort is deeply pleasurable. The intensity of greeting behaviors correlates with several factors. Duration of separation is one. The study we discussed earlier found that dogs showed more intense greetings after 2 hours of separation compared to 30 minutes. But the relationship isn't strictly linear. 4 hours didn't produce significantly more intense greetings than 2 hours. This suggests that once a certain threshold is crossed, perhaps around the 2-hour mark, the emotional response maxes out, or other factors besides pure duration become more important. Quality of the relationship matters. Dogs who are more strongly bonded to their owner, who show more attachment behaviors in general, tend to show more intense reunion behaviors. Dogs with anxious attachment styles may show particularly frenzied greetings, their reunion behavior tinged with a kind of desperation or relief. Dogs with secure attachments may show pleasure but are less frantic, more confident that the reunion was inevitable. Individual temperament plays a role. Some dogs are simply more exuberant by nature. They greet everyone enthusiastically, whether they've been gone 5 minutes or 5 hours. Other dogs are more reserved, showing pleasure in subtle ways, a wagging tail held low, leaning against their owner's soft eyes. The emotional experience may be similar, but the behavioral expression differs based on personality. There's an interesting evolutionary perspective on reunion behaviors. In wolves and wild canids, reunions after separation are important social rituals. When members of a pack reunite after hunting or exploring separately, they engage in greeting ceremonies that reinforce social bonds and reestablish pack cohesion. There's often submissive behavior from lower-ranking individuals, lowered body posture, licking at the mouths of higher-ranking individuals. There's also excitement and apparent pleasure, tail wagging, playful behavior, vocalizations. Dogs have inherited some of these reunion rituals. The face-licking behavior that many dogs engage in during greetings may be a vestige of wolf pups, licking the mouths of returning adults to stimulate regurgitation of food. In domestic dogs, this behavior persists as a greeting ritual that signals submission, affection, and excitement. Jumping up may serve a similar function, trying to reach the human's face, the social focus in both human and canine interaction. But not all dogs show the same reunion behaviors. Some differences are individual, some are learned. A dog whose jumping is consistently ignored or redirected will eventually modify that behavior. A dog whose vocalizations get lots of attention will learn to vocalize more. The specific form that reunion takes is shaped by both innate tendencies and learning history. There's also cultural variation in how humans respond to dog greetings, and this shapes the behavior. In some households, enthusiastic greetings are encouraged and reciprocated with equal enthusiasm. The human comes home and immediately engages in excited interaction with the dog. This reinforces and amplifies the dog's greeting behavior. In other households, calm greetings are the norm. The owner comes home, acknowledges the dog quietly, and doesn't engage in intense interaction until things have settled. This tends to produce calmer greeting behaviors from the dog. Neither approach is inherently better, as long as it meets the needs of both dog and owner, but mismatches can be problematic. An owner who wants calm greetings but inadvertently reinforces excitement by giving in to the dog's jumping and vocalizing will struggle to get what they want. Similarly, an owner who actively encourages frenzied greetings and then punishes the dog for jumping up on guests is sending inconsistent messages that confuse the dog. One particularly poignant aspect of reunion behaviors is what we see in dogs who've been separated from their owners for extended periods. Videos of military personnel reuniting with their dogs after months-long deployments show reactions of almost overwhelming intensity. These dogs seem to go through a sequence: initial confusion or disbelief, then explosive joy, then almost frantic physical contact, as if trying to reassure themselves that the person is really there. Some dogs show what looks like reproach or ambivalence, initially holding back before engaging in greeting, as if they're uncertain or even slightly resentful about the long absence. These extended separation reunions tell us something important. Dogs do seem to have some ability to track much longer durations, not precisely, but enough to distinguish between normal daily absences and genuinely long absences. And the emotional impact of these longer separations is significant. The dog hasn't just been waiting for their owner to come home from work. They've been existing without their primary attachment figure for an extended period, and the reunion is correspondingly more intense. Research on human attachment has shown that reunions after extended separations can be emotionally complex. Infants reunited with parents after long separations sometimes show ambivalent behavior, wanting closeness, but also showing anger or avoidance. The same pattern may occur in dogs. The dog desperately wants reunion, but there's also something like frustration or resentment about the abandonment. This complexity reminds us that dogs' emotional lives are not simple. They can experience mixed feelings, conflicting motivations, emotional nuance, bringing it all together. So, after this long journey through neuroscience and behavioral research, through the chemistry of bonding and the biology of time perception, through anxiety and joy and reunion, what can we say about what your dog truly feels when you leave? The answer is it varies. It varies by dog, by circumstances, by history, by temperament. But we can say with confidence that dogs are not indifferent to your absence. The bond between dog and human is real, measurable, biological. When you leave, your dog experiences that departure as a meaningful event. For well-adjusted dogs with secure attachments, your leaving might trigger mild disappointment mixed with confidence in your return. For anxiously attached dogs, your leaving triggers stress, possibly intense distress, even panic. Your dog's experience during your absence depends on many factors: how long you're gone, what you've trained them to expect, whether they have coping mechanisms and enrichment, whether they're healthy and comfortable, whether the environment is safe and predictable. A dog left for an hour with plenty of toys in a secure environment has a very different experience than a dog left for 8 hours with nothing to do and no one for company. And when you return, the reunion is meaningful. It's not just a response to the possibility of food or a walk, though those might be part of it. It's a genuine social reunion, motivated by attachment and affection. The surge of oxytocin, the drop in cortisol, the expression of joy. These aren't mere reflexes, they reflect genuine emotional experience. Understanding all of this, understanding what separation means to your dog, doesn't necessarily mean you can avoid ever leaving them. Life requires it. Work, errands, social obligations. You can't always bring your dog, but understanding can help you make choices that ease the experience for them. You can work on building secure attachment through consistent, responsive caregiving. You can practice gradual separations to build confidence. You can provide enrichment that keeps them engaged. You can recognize signs of distress and seek help if needed. Most importantly, you can rest easier knowing that for most dogs, separations, while not preferred, are manageable. They miss you, yes. They look forward to your return, absolutely. But they're capable of coping, of finding contentment in sleep and solo activities, of trusting that you'll come back. The strength of the bond doesn't mean the dog is helpless without you. It means they value your presence and they celebrate your return, and they've woven you into the fabric of their emotional life. And really, isn't that beautiful? Isn't it remarkable that across such evolutionary distance, across the gulf between human and canine, we've created relationships of such depth that two species can bond so completely that your absence is felt, your return is celebrated, and the time between is colored by anticipation? Our dogs have given us their trust, their affection, their companionship. Understanding what they feel when we leave is the least we can do in return. A gentle closing. As we come to the end of our exploration tonight, let's take a moment to appreciate what we've learned. We've journeyed through the neurochemistry of bonding, through oxytocin surges and cortisol responses. We've explored how dogs perceive time through scent clocks and circadian rhythms and that eternal present tense in which they live. We've examined the varieties of separation distress, anxiety, frustration, fear, loneliness, and we've witnessed the biology of reunion, that moment of joy when pack members come together again. Your dog's emotional life is richer than you might have imagined. The relationship you share has biological underpinnings that mirror the deepest bonds between humans. When you leave, your dog feels it, not in the ruminating, time-checking, clock-watching way you might feel someone's absence, but in their own immediate sensory, emotionally direct way. And when you return, they feel that too, with a pure expression of joy that most humans, with all our complexity and self-consciousness, can only envy. So the next time you're leaving your dog, even just for a little while, remember, they'll be thinking of you. Or rather, they'll be existing in a state shaped by your absence, attuned to the fading of your scent, the cycle of their internal clock, the memory of your departure, and the anticipation of your return. And they'll be waiting with all the patience and loyalty that dogs have shown us for thousands of years. If you found this exploration into the hidden emotional world of dogs meaningful, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to discover about the animal minds that share our world, about the science behind their behaviors, about the depth of their inner lives. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories to you, weaving together research and understanding in ways that deepen our connection to the creatures around us. Until we meet again, may your dogs greet you with joy. May your absences be brief, and may the bond you share continue to grow in understanding and compassion. Rest well.